FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to and hopefully even watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is 10/19/20. Well, man, John Rubino's on with us now, Dollar Collapse, and we want to get your emails. We got a lot to talk about today, John. I mean, this is one of the most incredible couple of days that I've ever seen. Economically, politically, you name it. I mean, just a major sea change. Complete shock. I'm talking about the Hunter Biden saga. Laptop incriminating emails, picture, Twitter banning, YouTube banning, everybody banning, Facebook. I mean, everybody's banning everybody now. And just imagine if this information had come out 6 months ago while the primaries were still going on, when the FBI got the laptop and just sat on it 9 months ago or 10 months ago. Anyway, would like to get your opinion. KL@kerrylutz.com. That's the email. So, John, what's your take on it all?
Well, we got our October surprise, right? Everybody was speculating that there was going to be something like that, some big thing that's being held for just before the election. And this, it turns out, wasn't even actually being held. Well, if the information we have right now turns out to be true, that this wasn't being held by Trump's political operatives waiting for just the right time, but it was being held by the FBI, who had the laptop and who just hadn't chosen to release any of the stuff that's on it. So then the guy at the computer repair store had made a copy of the hard drive and got frustrated because the FBI wasn't doing anything with it. So he released it to the New York Post, that is now, in the process of releasing what was on the hard drive. And it sounds like there's some nasty stuff. Hunter Biden, we got to kind of separate things that are wrong to criticize him. I mean, he had a drug problem, like lots of people, and did some stuff when he was addicted to drugs that nobody would want to see the light of day. And that's one thing. And, since so many people have been through something like that, jumping all over him for that is probably inappropriate. But then there's all this corruption that has nothing to do with him being addicted to drugs, where he was just using his influence as the son of the vice president to make a fortune. And he was bringing his dad into it, it sounds like. Part of what he was selling was meetings with Joe. And then part of what Joe was doing was protecting Hunter by, among other things, getting a prosecutor who was looking into a company that Hunter was a director of fired, and then bragging about it afterwards. So there's a lot here. And there's a lot to unpack with just a few weeks to go before the election. And there's a lot of questions that Biden is going to have to answer now. So we'll see how it plays out. But this has the feel of, remember the Hillary Clinton email thing that dropped right before the election? This is like that, but way bigger, because her stuff was more, she didn't handle her emails correctly and stuff, which I mean is definitely a problem for somebody in her position. But this is just blatant, in your face corruption. Again, if the stuff that's out there now turns out to be true, because remember, the Democrats believe it to be Russian propaganda.
Agitprop.
Talking points.
Agitprop. But look, I mean, they haven't denied it. Biden hasn't denied it. Hunter hasn't denied it. The attorney for Hunter requested the computer guy to send him back the hard drive. This is, and there's tens of thousands of emails. And then we've also got Breitbart, Schweitzer, who is really the gold standard in investigative reporting. He's got 26,000 emails from a guy who is one of Hunter's partners, and it verifies everything. Now, this thing is real. It's not Russian agitprop. It is the real deal. And and whether people care about it or not, That's what I find disturbing. Knowing what you know now, assuming it's true, could you possibly vote for somebody like Biden? Regardless what you think of Trump, could you vote for what appears to be the head of a crime family? I mean, he was making his son kick back 50% of his pay, according to the emails, go to Pops or the big guy, 10% of this corporation. And we've, according to Giuliani and company, barely scratched the surface, John.
And just this morning, and I'm not sure whether this is just a duplicate of something you just mentioned, but a Ukrainian lawmaker announced that they have another laptop from some associate of Hunter Biden. So there might be more stuff coming out. But, you know, I think support in this election is so solidified that even this, if it turned out to be flat out true and undeniable, all of this stuff, would still vote for Biden just because it's the same thing with the sexual assault thing against Biden just lately here, where, the Democrat response was, well, that's one. And Trump has 27 of those, and I think they would do the same thing with this, where, OK, yeah, he did this stuff, but Trump is still worse. Trump is still more corrupt. So, we've reached the point in our political devolution where the argument is, well, yeah, our guy's corrupt, but he's less corrupt than the other guy, and so we are deeply into the lesser of two evils territory here. And so the question will be, how much does this sway people who have already made up their minds and who really, truly don't want to change, don't want to switch over? Because how many Trump voters would vote for Biden under any circumstances? And how many Biden voters are going to vote for Trump no matter what comes out about Biden? I think it's relatively few. But what might happen is that a lot of people stay home if they're just totally disgusted by what used to be their guy. And so that's still a possibility where you just, you get a lot of none of the above going on out there. And that affects the outcome of this. But who knows? I mean, this is the craziest election. I voted by mail yesterday, and there was a big long line in front of the mailbox. Lots of people are voting early, which I don't know what that means either. But there was, a little mini traffic jam of people waiting to drive up to the mailbox. And so we're liable to get some early returns too, which is going to make it interesting, where you get indications like a week before the election, how it's going. That's new. I've never seen that before. So.
Hey, it's big news no matter how you cut it. And it's as bad as Giuliani and company are promising. We've barely seen anything so far. So we'll just have to sit back and wait. But imagine if all this had come out, Biden would have certainly been disqualified, and then Bernie would have been the candidate.
Well, that's a big part of this story, is that the information was available to law enforcement early enough that had it been released, Joe Biden wouldn't have been a viable primary candidate, at least. And Bernie Sanders was the next guy in line. So, yeah, it would have been Bernie Sanders against Trump, which would have been a better election.
Oh, for sure.
No matter what. Those two guys would have been just the political theater of a generation. That would have been so much fun to watch those two. And instead we get, Biden versus Trump, which is way less interesting, at least from a, political theater standpoint. I mean, my take on this election is that it seems way more important than it is, because we're broke either way, So what does it matter whether the Republicans are running $1 trillion deficits or the Democrats are running $1.5 trillion deficits? We are broke.
Yeah.
At some point in the future, and I don't know.
Here it is. Let me give you the perfect analogy, John. You're going to like this. It's as if the Titanic has hit the iceberg, and now we're trying to elect the best captain to pilot a sinking ship. And my decision is, I will keep dancing as long as the band plays on till the water is up over my head. At that point, it ain't going to matter. And that's the way I look at this. We're just electing a new captain to pilot the Titanic, and it's too late anyway. So let's enjoy the show and let the band play on. But hey, let's, speaking of that, you mentioned, how can there be an economic recovery when we still get 800, 900,000 claims, for new claims for unemployment insurance every week? How is that happening? How are we on the way to recovery? Even though the unemployment rate is like 7.9%, how can you believe any number that's issued from the U.S. government these days, John?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Lumina Gold, ticker symbol LUM on the Toronto Venture and LMGDF on the OTC, is yet another of legendary mining investor Ross Beaty's Lumina Group. It's advancing the largest primary gold deposit in Ecuador. The resource is estimated to contain 16.7 million ounces of gold and 2.2 billion pounds of copper. At just $7 US per ounce gold equivalent, it trades at an incredible 13% of its net present value. More good news is on the way with an updated PEA study expected in Q2 of 2020. It has unparalleled infrastructure. There's grid power to camp with plentiful, inexpensive hydropower available. It's close to 2 ports and is just 8 kilometers from a paved highway. Water is plentiful. It's at low elevation, and the closest community, which is very supportive of Lumina's effort, is just a 7-kilometer ride. With all this going for it, it's likely to follow the typical Ross Beaty formula, which means big returns to shareholders. Find out more and sign up for notifications at luminagold.com. That's Lumina, Lumina gold.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Yeah, this has been the weirdest recession in history by far, because normally, if you get this huge collapse in employment, which we got earlier this year, the financial markets respond to that, and the stock market crashes, and house prices go down, and you get all these macro numbers that are brutal, like plunging consumer spending and plunging auto sales, things like that. We got none of that this time around. Home prices are soaring, and if you put a house on the market, it sells right away now. And consumer spending just came out lately with a pretty good number. It's growing. And what I think is happening is that, all the stimulus money and all the forbearance that is out there is keeping things afloat. For instance, you don't have to pay your rent. At least you haven't had to up until just lately, and you don't have to pay your mortgage, or at least you haven't had to. And now you just told me when we were off the air that only 11% of student loan borrowers are paying their student loans. So you take all that together, and that frees up a lot of money, right? If you're not paying your rent, or you're not paying a mortgage, and you're not paying your student loans, you got a ton of extra money to play with, and people are spending some of that. So it makes the numbers look better than they really are. But see, all of this stuff that's not income, that's just delayed payments. So that at some point you are going to have to pay your rent and your back rent, and you're going to have to make good on the student loan payments that you didn't do this year. So all we did was once again move some consumption from the future into the present and make things look better than they actually are. This next year is just looking terrible on so many levels, because we'll have probably some political turmoil, and then we'll have all of this stuff come home to roost. Either mass evictions of renters and mass defaults by mortgage holders, and of course defaults by student loan borrowers, or we'll have a stimulus program that is so big that it bails out everybody in sight, but with $3 or $4 or $5 extra trillion on top of the what's the government's debt now? Is it like 25 trillion or 27 trillion or some crazy number like
27 trillion here, trillion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
It was just lately when we passed the milestone of $20 trillion of national debt. Now we're headed for 10 more trillion in a year. So all of this stuff points to instability, which in turn points to even bigger bailouts. So we are nowhere near done with this stuff. The idea that normal life is going to return anytime soon is just crazy, because what we're doing right now is building up future instability that will make things even crazier when it happens. So I think the next couple of years are just going to make this year seem kind of placid, and which takes you back to gold. You want to be hiding out from stuff now. You do not want to be long tech stocks, even though they might go up if we have another stimulus plan, and some of that puts money into Robinhood traders and they buy momentum stocks, and that sends tech stocks higher. That's an unacceptable risk. So you want to be hiding out in the safest possible stuff. in anticipation of all of this stuff, coming home to roost, and renters having their trouble, and mortgage holders having their trouble, and all these commercial landlords now whose stores are going bankrupt, and what are they going to do? Commercial real estate is at least one of the things that's actually appropriately suffering right now, unlike a lot of these other sectors. So bad things are going to come one way or another. We have our choice. Only on steroids now, where it used to be 1930s style deflationary depression or a hyperinflation. And we just took ourselves many steps closer to the point where that choice is irrevocable, where we really have to give up one in order to pursue the other, and the other will be a disaster. And it won't matter which. Either way, we are royally screwed within the next few years, one way or another.
You mentioned after the election, the potential of social unrest. It's kind of baked in the cake here. In the New York Post, the same one that broke Hunter Biden's email scandal, they're mentioning that the police are being put on notice. Everyone is expecting a major riot in New York City, regardless who wins. And I anticipate that will happen in many other cities. Supposedly, the rumor is that right after the election, Trump invokes the Insurrection Act of 1807 and literally sends the troops into all these cities. And that might very well be what it takes to put them down. And if Trump does get reelected, one of the main reasons will be from many people in the middle who are sick of these riots and sick of the inability or the refusal of these blue governors and mayors to stop them, because they're imminently stoppable. It just takes a little bit of strategy and a little bit of force. You don't have to go killing them, although honestly, I don't have a problem with looters being shot, but you don't even need to do that. And we're going to see massive social unrest right after the election, and maybe even the evening. It might even come at 10:30 when Trump perhaps is called the winner. And I've always felt, John, from November 9th, 2016, that Trump would be reelected. I mean, he literally started his reelection campaign right after he was sworn into office. And nothing that's happened recently has led me to believe that it's going to work otherwise. But man, this is we're in for a hell of a ride. The only other thing we really should mention, a couple of things. Rick Rule is saying that gold mining stocks are overbought. I've kind of felt that way for a while, some more so than others. And your question of whether gold seasonality will matter this time around in light of the pandemic, election instability, and a really bad economy for that matter.
Yeah, because normally this is the time to be loading up on gold and silver and the related mining stocks, because we're heading into the seasonally really strong time. But you really have to wonder whether seasonality is going to be on the list of things that affect the price of precious metals going forward, because it seems like these other things are a lot bigger. If we're in January and there's civil unrest and massive stimulus money being shoveled into the system, I'm not sure how much it's going to matter what Asian buying is doing in January. If there are a lot of weddings and a lot of gold and silver demand for that, that's normally a really good thing for precious metals. But these other things just seem so much bigger as impactors on that market. But you know what? Most of them are favorable, though. Most of the stuff where, maybe these things are going to be bigger than seasonality, most of them are really favorable for precious metals prices, because, civil unrest is the kind of uncertainty that leads you to want to hunker down and start prepping, right? And gold and silver are part of the whole prepping mindset. And then massive stimulus is great for precious metals, and that's almost baked in the cake. We are going to have to, if we don't have a pre-election stimulus plan, then whoever's in charge after that is going to have to come in with a huge one. So we're going to be dumping trillions of dollars into this economy, and that's good for precious metals too. So it could be that we have reinforcing factors in that market instead of dampening factors. In other words, sure, there will still be seasonality and it'll be pointing towards higher prices in the short run, but other things might be pointing towards even higher prices because they're even better. So the fact that Rick Rule is saying that junior miners are overvalued because they've been able to do so many good financings lately, and they've issued a lot of stock, and that's worrisome. But I think the metals markets themselves are looking as good as the rest of the world is looking bad right now. So I think that if you're a stacker, you shouldn't be worried at all, and if you want to take some of your stimulus money and put it into precious metals, this wouldn't be a bad time to do it.
Agreed. Completely agree with you. And I think we're going to just see things we've never thought we would ever see in these here United States. This election is a game changer. Where we're at now is a game changer. It looks like the country is just falling apart at the seams. And like I said, which pilot do you want running the Titanic? That's what it comes down to. Still going to hit that iceberg, or it already has. It's still sinking. And there's really no way to save it. And I guess we've got one other thing to discuss here. You mentioned the fact that only 11% of people with federal student loans are paying during COVID-19. The president issued an executive order to pretty much forestalling or giving a moratorium on student loan repayments. So that's at least largely responsible for it, but maybe half would be paying otherwise. And that is the largest asset on the federal government's books, student loans, believe it or not, for what they're worth. Finally, you picked this one up. In the UK, people in hard-hit areas who are dating but don't live together are banned from indoor sex, but I guess outdoor sex is okay. Public sex in public places. Is that what we're dealing with here, John?
Yeah, it sounds like that's what we're dealing with here. It's just don't go to each other's houses because you might track a disease in when you go in. There is the old Winston Churchill World War II speech that was so influential. We will fight on the beaches. We will fight in the streets. And there are updated versions of that now with something else instead of fighting in the. So yeah, that's just an example of how crazy the restrictions have gotten, because in so many cases, they just don't make any sense. Like I was in a restaurant the other day where you have to wear a mask walking to your table. Then you take your mask off and you eat. And then you put your mask back on and walk outside. So much of this stuff is something out of Monty Python or Saturday Night Live now, but it's real. I think the incoherence of the experts is one of the big stories and one of the big problems, because if they were consistent and consistently right, then it would have been easy to trust them and do what they say. But because they're going back and forth, they're saying something and then taking it back and then saying it again, and I think they've lost a lot of trust. And that makes it really hard to have a coherent national policy, to the extent that we should have any national policy with this. The Sweden numbers continue to look really good relative to ours. So, it's possible, still completely possible, that the best thing to have done was just going to be to go for herd immunity.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
People live their lives.
Yeah, really, COVID has been over for months now. It's below the point of epidemic, which is 5.5% of deaths being caused by a particular cause, classifies it by CDC parlance as an epidemic. So the epidemic's over. We got 5-10 people a day dying in Florida. We have 700-800 people a day who die here, and it's barely at the point of an epidemic. But the other thing is that they found recently that 85% of the people getting COVID, contracting it, are wearing masks most of the time or all of the time. So that shows how good masks are. They're useless. Anyway, we got to go now. Make sure you take a look at John's site, dollarcollapse.com, our site, Financial Survival Network, and sign up for our newsletters. John, we will pick up next week.
See you, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.